What is up, Flesh and Blood players? Today we're going to be talking through the World Championships Philadelphia meta coming ahead. It's currently the Monday before the tournament. We've got a really massive, exciting weekend to look forward to. We've got the keynote speech. We've got all the information that we're going to get there. We've got the Premier Play announcement. We're going to get all the information about all the tournaments we're going to see. We've got pretty much every team represented going into this event. We've got several new contenders like ourselves and Team Go Again from Japan. It's going to be a really exciting time. Um, it's going to be the best. Really, tune into the live stream this weekend. It's going to be incredibly exciting and going to be the best place to watch Flesh and Blood because this is the pinnacle of competitive play. We've got two formats on offer this weekend. We've got Living Legend, and then we also have CC. So today we're going to be going through and we're going to be breaking down what my kind of thoughts are about the CC metagame and what we're going to be seeing going into both the CC and LL metagame going into this weekend. We're going to start with CC because I understand that's what people want to see. That's what people always want to see, the controversial takes that are going on about CC, whereas LL I think is a bit more wild and got a lot more interesting things going on to it. So yeah, let's just kind of jump right in. So we have decks that are in specialist tier. These are the decks that go from anywhere from like C tier to don't play, but then go up to special, go up to those SRA tier decks with enough practice and reps and understanding. We got S, which is just like your best decks in format. I don't think people are going to be surprised by the decks I put there. A is decks that can hang at the top of the meta and are actually contention. B, it would be a bit more surprising, but I'd expect one or two of these to make top 8 in some form. And then C tier decks are kind of would be very surprising to see. And then don't play are kind of, I think it would be a bit of a shooting star miracle if these decks made top 8. Then not legal / not real hero is pretty self-explanatory. So I want to kind of start at the top and then work our way down. Let's talk about the S tier real quick. This is going to be the easy thing. We all know what's going on with CC at the moment. Syndra, Jakai of Retribution. I mean, it's the deck. It's the best deck in the format right now. I don't think this is a particularly contentious topic. I think it's just kind of running over the two best decks in format and still has like amazing game even into its worst matchups. The deck is just incredibly powerful. We've seen numerous good players pick it up lately, like putting Tam and Gordon Ko at calling Sydney. I don't think we can really be surprised. I think Syndra is going to be incredibly represented this weekend and is definitely the source for CC going forward. Right behind Syndra is, of course, Verdant, One of the Rose. We've seen all of the Super Min-Max team kind of move on to this deck recently, and we've seen it kind of adapt to be able to push out the decks that we're targeting it, like Gravy, which has kind of made us graduate from this triangle matter into more of just a 2-deck format. Which then means, of course, that we have to talk about Gravy. Gravy is going in A tier. He is now firmly a step behind these 2 decks. And honestly, I think I would even go as far as putting him in Specialist, because I think the people who are actually going to get the best out of this deck are the only ones who stand a real chance. Because even when you get every single min-max point out of Gravy in every game, you're still at a disadvantage against Syndra, for example, or against Verdance. Like, you still don't have agency compared to other decks into those decks. So I think Gravy, while still very powerful and still a good deck, the amount of knowledge that you really need to play him and be able to compete at the same level as these S tier decks means that he kind of gets relegated to that specialist tier, which I think is maybe more appropriately down here in between S and A. Next, let's talk about everyone's favorite hero. No contention at all. Kato Drakai of Aoife has managed to make his way to the World Championships. I know a lot of people were kind of hoping that he would rotate before this event started. This is obviously a bit surprising. I think he's, before the last weekend's results come in, or maybe they might have come out today, he is currently like 5 ProQuest wins away from this weekend not being legal, but unfortunately I'm pretty sure he's getting there. So it'll be interesting to see who chooses to bring this deck. I'm sure there will be many like specialists who end up just returning to this deck for surprise factor, and just the fact that he's always an interesting pick. into any metagame, and if you have a consistent, good Verdance plan, maybe the deck is just very strong into this current metagame. Let's go next. Let's talk about some Super Slam heroes, because these are obviously, you know, it's been a few months through set release. Let's see where these have kind of landed. Played in my original tier list for the Pro Quest season, was in this A tier. I think unfortunately, people just haven't solved some of the issues that the deck has. I think it is one of the stronger options that has really niche, specific reasons why I would play it into a metagame, but I think unfortunately she's currently don't play into a metagame full of Syndra, Verdance, and Gravy Bones and Kano. You know, if we're saying that like a bunch of non-linear decks are kind of going to arise to tackle the Verdance and Syndra metagame, I think that this deck really struggles into that, and I think that she's not exactly playing in the metagame that's greatest for her. We can do a quick speed run of some heroes. Betsy is obviously not really a real hero at this stage. She hasn't really been fleshed out properly. Olympia is kind of in the same boat. Teklo is unfortunately just kind of, he's a real hero, but he's just not really doing what he needs to do. Reinhardt, unfortunately, still not in the place where he needs to be. Still has pretty rough matchups into a lot of the field, and unfortunately his Armory deck is not legal for World Championships Philadelphia, but is legal for the calling on Saturday. So I think potentially we could see Reinhardt later in the weekend, but honestly for the World Championships, I don't think we can expect much from the big green man. Arachne Huntsman, I think this deck has gone down to C tier lately. I think it started as like a kind of interesting option into Verdance, but I think as we've seen Syndra kind of peak and kind of rise in dominance, I think we've seen this deck kind of fall off. Let's talk about a little bit of an interesting one. Let's talk about Puffin Hightail. Puffin is this deck that, like, it's really funny. Before Backskin Thrust released, I was at a kebab after an Armory one night, and I was like ranting, and I was like, oh, maybe this Puffin deck could be insane. Maybe this boost Puffin deck is kind of crazy. Like, you just crank 2 items and then you just draw the card. Or you like crank 1 item and then play Polycranker, and then they've got to deal with it. And most decks can't deal with it. And then everyone told me it was crazy and this deck sucks, and they were right. Puffin still sucks. Puffin is not the play for this weekend. I don't want to play Puffin into this meta, but I do think the deck is significantly more powerful now in its current boost variant. I think Pirate Puffin, unfortunately, is a bit dead at this stage. I think the only card that she really cares about that says Pirate on it is Golden Skywarden, I believe the card's name is. I've spent some time on this deck. I like this deck. I think it's strong, but I think unfortunately in this metagame it's maybe not the correct choice. Dash.io, however, I think we've got to say that Dash.io is still one of the best choices. I think she's one of the decks that gains the most equity out of Syndra kind of being at this top spot and kind of being at this perceived one of the 2 best decks. I think Dio has game into Verdance, it has game into Syndra because of things like the T-Bone effects. I think everybody can kind of agree Dio is kind of a pretty good source at this point. I'm sure we're going to see CYK Lionel take it down this weekend, which is going to be incredible to watch. Arachne Marionette is a sneaky one, which is very on theme for this metagame, honestly, and very on theme for the Assassin class. Marionette is like a deck that I keep like playing around with and I keep looking at, and I always just see like a couple people near me. We saw Matt Clark come, I believe, 10th at the Calling Sydney with the deck. The deck is kind of scary when it does the thing. What I'm interested in is if it can mitigate the fail states of the deck and kind of deal with those enough to kind of overcome the inherent like problems or weaknesses of some of its turns. And whether the spike damage that it presents on things like Kiss of Death, Tarantula Toxin, and stuff like that is actually worth the kind of headache you go through playing with Mark and dagger management and everything like that. But I think it's definitely a deck to watch, and I think that there might be a couple of specialists this weekend who really know what's going on. Slippy, however, Slippy is in the dog play tier. Because why would you play Slippy at this point when you could play Huntsman as the better fatigue deck and Marionette as the better aggro deck? The spike that Marionette gives you has just kind of seemed to be proven to be better at this stage than what we were kind of expecting out of Slippy at this stage. Maybe this will change with the Armory deck coming up. I think that's going to be extremely exciting to see, and I'm also really excited to see the rest of the cards in that. I don't think we've seen many of them previewed apart from the random 0 for 3 stealth card, but that's going to be really exciting to see when it comes out. The state of Katsu in 2025 is very grim. Katsu will stay and don't play where he belongs, and honestly, we could nickname this tier WTR Heroes, because, well, look at us, we got 3 of the 4. Yep. Yeah, Bravo's also still grim, he's still just a Guardian. Honestly, he's close to being not a real hero at this point, because there's just 8 other Guardians that do what he does better. Yeah, they really need to do something with Bravo if they ever want him to LL. Let's go back to Super Slam Heroes. I feel like we didn't talk about enough of them. Tough Nut. Tough Nut's a deck. Anyway, RKO is a deck that we saw a lot of good players pick up at Calling Sydney and kind of start preparing for Worlds. And I think this deck's really interesting because it plays on an axis that the rest of the game isn't really balanced around, but also most players don't know how to respond to. Like the axis of like win more is something that I think is a little bit underutilized or underexplored by card game players, full stop. Just because, you know, deck building philosophy says like a Scar for a Scar is always going to be better than like a Wounding Blow, because there's going to be the situations where you need to win and you're behind. And RKO has like this really interesting dynamic going on where the deck just wants you to keep winning more. And that means that when it like snowballs, the deck is incredibly strong. And the deck has really interesting tools into decks like Verdant, where it has things like Off Smash, and it plays a bunch of like random tools like Oasis Respite, so it has like good prevention against like its Arcane. I've watched some games of this at Calling Sydney with Jacob Clements and I'm forgetting his name, but local Australian player that I've caught around quite a lot. But it was really interesting watching those games. I know Ben Dodd has been working a lot on this deck lately, and I think has really interesting tech into most of the game. Will its kind of issues be resolved? Will it just kind of suspect to the fact that like win more is always worse than win comeback mechanics? Maybe. I think B tier is a really solid place for it, where it has a lot of polarizing matchups and matchups that are winnable, but also still just like improbable, if that makes sense. Live Goldmane, the other reviled hero. This deck is interesting. If you haven't seen all of Barry's games from Calling Sydney, shout out him. I know he's been doing a lot of work on the deck. He won a Pro Quest with it. I believe he came day 2, and I think had a bit of an unfortunate run where he went to time a couple of times. I think this deck is very good. I think it's very interesting. I think it has a great matchup into a lot of the top decks. I think it has a really good matchup into Gravy, which is something that you kind of need in 2025. I think this deck is maybe something to watch out for this weekend and could maybe surprise people by how strong it is, especially when you don't really know what's going on and then your opponent just dumps 22 damage on you. Alright. Josh, don't watch this next 30 seconds. Yell is a deck. It's a deck. It has gameplay, like an aggro Yell has tech into Syndra, but it just has such an abysmal Verdance matchup. I'll leak some insider information. Josh, I played like a random like Verdance list with I don't even think there was pot or anything in the deck. There was like 1 blue evergreen and 1 red, and that was it. And Josh threw like 70 cards of Jarl that were tailored to beat Verdance and just fatigue the deck. And we got to the end game, and I like realized what he'd been setting up all the way and how his way of beating the evergreens essentially. And I just looked at it and I went, this still doesn't work. Like, the deck just can't beat Verdance. I'm convinced that like the only way that it beats Verdance is if the Verdance player doesn't understand what's happening in the game and maybe doesn't have much experience in the end games. The deck just has like fundamental problems into Verdance. It can just lose to Syndra. It can just lose to a bunch of other random things. anybody. There's a few rough matchups floating around, like Kasai and other Guardians that might have better tools. Like, I could see this. I think this deck just has like fundamental problems that still haven't been answered. It'll be interesting to see if we maybe get an expansion card or two that pushes this deck to kind of reach where it needs to be. Ira, the queen of mid-range, but honestly she's just not doing much right now. I don't think we can expect much from her this weekend. Speaking of mid-range, let's talk about Florian. Like, the Draconic Dagger that has Spell Void just has kind of pushed this deck into irrelevance a little bit. I genuinely think, like, the Syndra matchup has gone from playable to just, like, abysmal. And also the Syndra deck has just become more refined. Florian has more game than people believe into Verdance, but your Greedy matchup's still terrible. And let me get this straight, like, let me get this, like, clear. Like, just because Greavy's in Specialist tier instead of S tier, in my opinion, I still think he's going to be the third most represented deck. Which means if you want to bring a deck, it needs to still, like, we're not in Triangle meta, but you still need to pick a deck like we are in Triangle meta, because people are still going to bring this guy. And Florian, unfortunately, just does not have the source into Gravy, and he does not have that much source into Verdance, and he does not have that much source into Syndra. So Florian has fallen from this deck that we consider like B to C, and is just like stuck in Don't Play Now. And honestly, unless we get a BNR that targets these three decks following World, I think that Florian might just be staying here for a very long time at this point. Max is, yeah, it's Max. He's still banned. They said no high octane, so that deck's still banned. Let's go through this bottom one real quick. Let's just try and flick off some quick ones. Riptide is still a hero. Yep. Levrier is still a deck. I don't think much has changed with Super Slam. Like, she got some marginal upgrades, but not enough. Bolton, still a hero. The Rimfear Iron Song, the Logan Boyd special. Dory has a real place in this metagame, and I think I'd actually put it pretty solidly in like the A to specialist tier. We saw Andrew Chi come, I believe, 13th place on Dory at Calling Sydney. And Andrew also like told me, he was like, I have not played this deck like till 2 weeks ago. And the fact that he like kind of cleaned up that weekend, like the deck has a terrible Verdance matchup. Let's all just like, let's get it out of the way. That's the elephant in the room. The Verdance matchup sucks. We're all aware of this. But the Syndra matchup, pretty good. And I think it's one of the decks that doesn't get punished as much by the die roll when it comes to Syndra. Like, some decks you just like have good Syndra matchups as long as you go second, but as soon as you go first it just like collapses and you're just like, oh my god, what am I doing? Then we look at the Gravy matchup, and the Dory deck also just like eats Gravy. Like, the well-practiced Dories that like understand the matchup really well and correspond to how the Gravies get out of it, the Dories just eat them. So I think this deck has a little bit of sauce going into this matchup. And I think we're noticing a bit of a theme with the A tier. Like, to be an A tier, you need to be good into like 2 of the 3 of the triangle. Like, Dory is good into Gravy and Syndra, but bad into Verdance. But that matchup's also playable. Dio is bad into like Verdance, but it's good into Syndra and Gravy. But that matchup's also playable. Life, nobody really understands what's going on with that deck. Let's grab another deck from A tier so that we can kind of keep this going. Kasai. I'm gonna try and be unbiased in this, but Kasai is still a really good deck, and it still has a really good lane into this metagame. I'd have to put it like here at the moment to slightly below Dio, probably below Dio. Look, the deck has a really good Syndra matchup as long as you go second, and a pretty winnable one when it goes first, which is more than can be said for most decks in the game. The deck has one of the best Gravy matchups in the game, in my opinion, and your Verdance matchup is not as bad as people on Twitter will try and tell you about it. And we're starting to kind of see, like, I'm talking about this A tier, and it's starting to really talk about how the meta is developing. Like, a bunch of decks beat Gravy and Syndra, but lose to Verdance. But then Verdance loses to Syndra and Gravy. And that's the real triangle that's going on. It's like Cinder and Gravy kind of occupy the same source, if that makes sense. Like, we're in a triangle, but the triangle is Verdance beating the A tier decks, and then the A tier decks beating Cinder and Gravy, and then Cinder and Gravy beating the Verdance. And that's the actual triangle we're in, which is like hella interesting. But yeah, I think that's where we kind of are with Kasai right now. I think it's another deck that it has really interesting play because of the fact that it also beats a lot of the other A tier decks and the specialist decks. Obviously, your Kano matchup still sucks, but whatever. And it has interesting play into every deck below itself and on the same tier as itself. The only question is, how do you feel about beating Verdances? If you're not expecting Verdance to do well, and you're not expecting it to go well, I think the deck is a good choice. And I think if you feel confident about your die rolls into Syndra, the deck is amazing. And I think my performance over the weekend at Calling Sydney kind of showed that as well. The other warrior, Fang Drakaya Blades. I'm a Fang hater. I don't think this deck's good. It has a level of variance that is not... It's not typical of Warrior, and I think the problem with the deck is that, like, Warrior has this thing where you have to fulfill a condition, but even if you don't fulfill that condition, you're still consistently good. The problem with Fang is that when you don't fulfill the condition, and you have 4 reds in hand, you lose the game. Like, if you're pitching 2 reds to swing 2 swords on your turn 1, turn 2, like going second, what are you doing? Like, how are you going to beat Syndra that way? That's just not a real thing. Like, I think the problem with Fang is that it has a worse, like, matchup. Like, it loses the Syndra matchup being good, which is the reason to play Warrior, in my opinion. Like, your Gravy matchup's good. I don't think your Marionette matchup's that good, which is, like, the thing that propped it up in the last metagame was that it beat Slippy. But I'm not actually sure that's true about Marionette. Your Wizard matchup sucks, so your Verdance matchup sucks because of Scour. Your Kano matchup sucks. Your Cillian matchup sucks when we talk about him. Like, this is not a metagame for Fang, and I think Fang's a really interesting deck, and it has specific metagames where it's really interesting, but I would not want to be bringing it into this World Championships. Prism, on the other hand, Prism is this interesting little source where all of the top teams, everybody just talks about, like, Prism, like it's this, like, spooky ghost man. And that's because Prism is the spooky ghost man. No one really wants to deal with it. No one wants to think about the fact that Kevin Murphy is going to be at this tournament, and then we all have to be scared of him. And then this deck has playable game into Syndra, and has a good Gravy matchup, and allegedly a good Verdance matchup. Like, is this the secret god? Maybe. But the real issue with Prism's kind of like the anti-Kasai, if that makes sense. Like, Kasai is a deck that has reasonable matchups into all the top 3, but then has, like, amazing matchups into everything outside of the top 3, apart from Kano. Whereas, like, Prism's thing is that she has good matchups into the top 3, but terrible matchups into so many random decks here. Like, Prism just, like, gets out aggroed or blocked out by so many random decks like the Guardians and the Brutes. By, like, Kasai, she just gets blown up by Dio and, like, the really fast aggro decks. So she occupies this really, like, unique space in the metagame where she's, like, in a really tight meta like Worlds, she actually has a lot of flexibility and a lot of space. But I think the real problem with the deck is that, like, all 3 of these matchups are, like, allegedly good, or at least 50-50, but all those games are still losable. And trying to, like, mass repeat success and wins against these decks for, like, a really long tournament, like, I think this is 8 rounds of CC or 9 rounds. I wouldn't want to be doing that if I was bringing Prism, which I think shuffles it down to closer to the end of Specialist here. KO Armed Dangerous is a deck. Yeah, it's a deck. It's a Brute deck. I think it's probably in C tier. Maybe there's some source, I don't know, like Noah Bagelman has been talking a lot about how he feels good about the deck and he's enjoying it, and I'm glad he is. I want him to show me the source. Show me the reason that this deck is good into this triangle and the rest of the decks that are being brought right now. But yeah, I'm kind of throwing down the gauntlet for him a little bit, but yeah. Asilium, look, the last couple of metagames, Asilio has had this like weird thing where people have brought Gravy in overwhelming numbers, and that's propped up his win rate. But now that we're in like a metagame where Gravy is kind of like the cuck of this format, while Syndra and Verdance are like too busy like actually going through, Asilio is just kind of like your consistency and space to do the thing against Syndra just doesn't exist. And the decks that are like starting to target like Syndra, like Dio I imagine is quite a hard matchup, just seem like rough matchups that I wouldn't want to be playing. Like I imagine Kano probably just bullies Asilio too. I wouldn't want to be playing Asilio into this metagame. I wouldn't want to be playing it into these top two decks. Like the Verdance matchup statistically I think is fine. But like you just lose it too high of a percentage of the time that I would not be wanting to bring it into not just like the Swiss rounds, but also a top 8 where I have to generate a repeatable game plan. We haven't talked about this much, but like I think repeatable game plans that like repeatedly successful become even more valuable in this world because of the fact that you can play more than one game of the same format. And I think Asilio suffers from the issue that into like some decks like Verdance, it has like a 50-50. And then sometimes you just lose the 50-50. Like if I'm playing like a best of, I think it's best of 3. That's like the formatting of it, and the winner picks 2 of the formats. So you play like 2 LL and 1 CC, or 1 CC 2 LL, or it might be best of 5. I'm not sure. But the actual like breakdown of it means that I want more consistent, repeatable game plans. Like if I'm playing Syndra, and I'm like sitting down against like a Gravy player or a Verdance player in top 8, I feel so much better because I understand that my game plan is successful more than 50% of the time, and that it's more likely than not that my game plan will just like win a higher percentage of the time, if that makes sense. Like I feel better about winning 2 games with Syndra than I do about winning 2 games of Asilio into Verdance, for example. And I think that's really the crux of the deck, and really a crux with like, is the crux of the issue with like a lot of decks in this format, and a lot of decks this World Championship, is how repeatable is your game plan really, and how much of it stacks up against the best players in the world, because you have to account for both of those things here. Vincent, on the other hand, consistent, does the thing, has a great Syndra matchup, has a questionably good Gravy matchup that allegedly exists, has a bunch of like other like interesting matchups in the metagame. I think Vincent might kind of be sourced for this event, you know, like, it has a really good Syndra matchup. It has a terrible Verdance matchup, it's abysmally bad. I would like, if you haven't watched that before, it's a rough game to watch. But like, the Syndra matchup's just kind of cool to watch, and it's very repeatable, which is like, we just talked about how good repeatability is in this format. I don't know. I could see some things happening from Vincent this weekend. I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm saying it could happen. And I think that's what's exciting. Volda is another Guardian. Yep. Let's talk about a real Guardian. This guy, we've just talked about good Syndra game plans. Victor's got a pretty good Syndra game plan. It's called I Have 20 Block. And I get rewarded for blocking with my cards. Getting rewarded for blocking with your cards is very good against the deck that doesn't want you to block them. Test of Strength? Pretty good card. Test of Iron Grit? Also a pretty good card. I think Victor might be sourced. I could see this deck being real. Like, imagine if Syndra just like runs over the Verdances and the Gravies. And it's just like, you get to the top tables you get for your first 2 rounds, and you just start eating Syndras just on your way to top 8. My question is, like, I could see a top 8 of this deck. I don't think I could ever see it winning Worlds, which is, like, the reason I think this deck might be a bit more scary to bring. And also, I think this deck will be very underrepresented, of course, because, you know, Who wants to bring Victor in this metagame? Azuri. Yep. It's Azuri. It's still a deck that exists. It's still fine. Yep. Fi. Why are you bringing Fi? Why are you bringing Fi over Syndra? That's my big question. Like, is there a reason? Maybe I'm just not aware. Like, I don't know. I know Ellie Bird has been on a bit of a tear with the deck lately, but I just don't actually know what it does better than a Syndra deck. I don't actually know if there's a single matchup that gets better, and if there isn't a bunch of matchups that just get worse. So I think Fi, unfortunately, is stuck in the don't play tier for the foreseeable future. Maybe one day he'll get his LL, but it might not be sometime soon. And of course, I had to leave Marlon for Taylor Crawford, and I had to just leave Marlon for last so that I could really emphasize where I think it belongs on this list, which is the not real hero category. I don't think this deck's good. Sue me. Try and stop me. Not real hero. Anyway, next format. Okay, fine, we can talk about Marlon. This deck, allegedly, we just talked about a repeatability of game plan. It can beat Syndra consistently, apparently. I'm using heavy quotation marks here because I'm not sure I believe anything I hear about this deck. It can beat Verdant, allegedly. If you look at like what I'm doing with my eyes, you can kind of tell. I'm not sure I believe that. I don't think it can beat Gravy Bones. That matchup seems cursed. I don't think it can beat the Warriors. I think it would probably struggle into Life because Life is just like kind of the better version of what that deck's doing. I'm not really sure how it would do into Dio, but I'm very curious to watch that game actually. That sounds like fun. And I'm not quite sure what it does into the non-linear decks. Like its Kano matchup sounds abysmal. But maybe I'm tripping. But it does allegedly have a good Syndra matchup. And we'll be talking about this deck more when it comes to LL, but I think I'm like reasonably happy to put it in the middle of C tier and leave it there. Because you can't expect to just play Syndra for the entire event. But maybe one person will, and if that person does, and they just like also do well in the LL games, maybe someone top 8's playing this deck, which means I can't put it in don't play tier. So Marlon is gonna have to live in the C tier for now, unfortunately for me. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Marlon. And I think this is overall the tier list, and we can kind of see how like the whole thing is kind of sculpted by these two decks. And I think there's a lot of play going on between the specialist tier, the S tier, the A tier, and the B tier. And I think anything above B is really interesting. C tier and below, I don't think it's. I think these heroes are gonna have a bad weekend. But yeah, let's move on to LL. I'm gonna quickly just sort through a bunch of these heroes because there is no way we can talk about 55 heroes in like a short time span. So yeah. Okay. I think we got the LL board where I want it to be. These are all the decks that I think belong in don't play. Don't bring these decks. Let's just double check just in case. But yeah, not seeing. Yeah, I think these are all the decks that are worth talking about at the very least. Let's start where we ended with CC. Let's talk about the hyped up deck for this world, the kind of open secret that is Marlon. LL Marlon is a deck that I'm willing to talk about and actually respect. I think the problem with this deck is that people are bringing in this deck expecting Viserai to kind of be 100% of what's going on in this format. And people are not willing to expect that people have actually thought about this deck. Like, we're doing a lot of talking about Marlon as if it's this deck that has no answers to it. But what if Viserai just shows up with the right tools to just beat this deck? Like, Viserai with Warmongers existed for a while, guys. Let's not forget that exists. Like, Also, like, this is a format where we can play 3 Warmongers now. Like, there is a lot of decks that will just shut this deck down for a turn and then get space to do their own thing. So, I think Marlin, even though it's been hyped up as, like, this secret S tier deck or, like, A tier deck, I think it's probably closer to a B tier deck. It's a deck, it does one thing, but I don't think its game plan is repeatable, and I don't think it's going to hold up against the players who have really been testing this format and getting ready for World Championships. Viserai, who we just talked about, the definition of a repeatable game plan. It's hyper consistent. One half of its combo starts on the board. It has a really good slow game. It has a really good long game. It has access to split damage. It has damage stacking. It's also just really aggressive and fast. It has some very obnoxious tools like Succumb to Temptation. That's one of the best fridges in the game. It makes room chance. There's not much more than we can say about that. That's the definition of a really good deck. Yep. Yeah, not much more to say about Viserai. It is a good deck. It is like what people are targeting. I do expect it to be the largest percentage of the metagame. I don't think anyone's really arguing with that. Yeah, that's where everyone's kind of at with that deck at the moment. Now, let's move on to something a little more spicy. Aurora is a deck. It has access to the Flicker combo. It has access to a lot of powerful tools like just that, like Lightning House, that's very consistent. It has good offensive output, but not the highest offensive output that's like consistent, like Viserai or like the other Rune Blades. But it doesn't get shut down by Warmongers, which means it has a space in this format. I don't think that space is very big. I don't think that space is very good, but if someone's like spent a lot of time on this and cracked a bunch of the matchups, maybe that deck has a place. And yeah, that's all I can really say about that deck. Verdance as well is this weird deck that I keep hearing rumblings about, but I could not tell you what the deck is meant to look like. I've heard whisperings of a Tuma Fiendal to make some crazy combos on your own turn with Rampant Growth Life. I've heard tales of burn bears, no burn bears, all kinds of bears, Tuma V for win. Like, I don't really know what's going on with this deck, but I want to put it in C tier just in case there's something I'm missing. And I think there's something here. I don't know what it is, but I think there's something there. Enigma, I think is actually a bit of a sleeper pick at B. Enigma is like this deck that was able to contend with Viserai in its kind of strongest form during CC. You know, apart from the fact that like it didn't have Skeletal Sonata, obviously that's the big omission. But Enigma has tools, and it has tools that are interesting to see if it can maybe beat this Viserai deck. And I think if somebody put time into it, I think there is something there. Enigma also has this big buff where she's really good against the other guy, and the other guy is Starvo. And apparently Enigma just like eats Starvo alive, which would make sense, it's a Guardian. That kind of checks out. Talking about Starvo, I think he's the other deck that we could probably expect to see as the second most represented. It's the deck with the widest card pool in the game, I'm pretty sure still. He's Starvo, he does the thing, sometimes he just uses 5 times in a row and you die, so he's got a variance mechanic built in. He has access to Felling the Crown, Cadaverous, like he's still an amazing deck. I think the main things kind of stopping him from hitting this S tier is that you have to pick what you're targeting in this metagame, and you can't necessarily deal with everything at once. So I'm not sure if he'll be one of the best performers this weekend, but I think he's an easy comfort pick, and a lot of people will pick him regardless of whether they think the Viserai matchup is good or bad. Lexi is probably going to be in Don't Play this weekend. The Starvo matchup's abysmal, the Viserai matchup's abysmal. Everything's kind of abysmal. I think Lexi unfortunately just needs a couple of expansion slot cards, maybe something like Regrowth Shock to come down for her, or potentially a second hero version to maybe boost her card pool and bring her into an LL deck. Unfortunately, I just think she's not the pick for this weekend. Kano is in Specialist here, who's shocked. Yep, moving on. Prism, I don't know why you would bring Prism in this format, and people keep talking about the secret Prism deck. Like, what does this deck really do? Like, you get Luminaris and you get Prism, and then you die to Viserai, and then you die to Starvo, and then you die to most decks. Prism not in this format, I'm pretty sure. I don't really understand why you would bring Prism. If there is a secret Prism deck and I have egg on my face, I think that would be very entertaining, and I'm very excited to watch Worlds and see the secret Prism deck. Oldhim's still in Don't Play. Sorry guys, deck's still bad. Iyslander is like this secret, like weird thing going on, where theoretically it has the best tools to deal with Viserai. It has, you know, Scour to deal with Rune Chant stacking. You have, you can kill Malefics that way. You have access to Frostbites to slow him down, make his turn smaller, punish him for trying to be multiplicative. You have tons of blues for 8B. You have like really good defensive tools. I don't remember how Channel the Bleak Expanse works with Sonata, but I imagine it's not good for the Viz. Yeah, this deck allegedly should be like pretty playable into Viz and should have a thing. The problem is the deck just doesn't work sometimes. And I'm not sure that it does. But I think if somebody has found a way to make that matchup like consistently good and has plans for the harder matchups like Starvo, I think this deck's really interesting. Dromai, on the other hand, Dromai I think is a little secret sleeper, and I think this is the deck. This is what Marlon thinks she is. Like, Dromai is this sleeper deck that has like crazy good matchups into most decks in the format, and is also just like absurdly powerful. And just like it asks the really annoying question of like, can you deal with my allies? And 99% of decks in the format can't answer that question. Like, I think Dromai probably eats Viserai, and it probably eats Starvo. I think the question is, can it beat the high rolls? Like, when Viserai does just hit like the turn 3, like Natty Sonata for like 12, those are the games this deck loses. Like, it's a bit too fair. But the games it wins are like the fair ones. And I think that's why this deck has like real tech and source into this meta. Chain, man, can I have Dirge back, please? Like, why did this guy get to stay the best deck in format, and Chain just got sent to the Shadow Realm, literally. Like, I don't really know what they were cooking there. This deck sucks. Please unban Dirge. Unban Dirge and then just like ban something from this deck, Skeleta. I don't know. Zen is probably like the top of this like little pack of B tier decks, where it's like, it has the sauce and it has the juice when it does the thing, but if it doesn't do the thing, the deck is abysmal. But it also has a good Viserai matchup, which means that it has like a good Viz matchup, and then against everything else, it just needs to do the thing. And that's not an abysmal question to be asking for this Worlds, because if most people are just going to default to Viz, then we could see this deck pull some sauce. And I think this deck's pretty good. So yeah, I think that's where I'm at with Zen. Like, if it can just do the thing into everything else, then it's great. Azalea is a deck. There's 3 Warmongers now, so that's pretty bad. Red in the Ledger is probably at the worst it's ever been in this format, which is kind of weird, but like, Starvo and Dromai making up the S tier, it's just kind of like, like, you're gonna Red in the Ledger them, and then they're gonna play Felling at the Crown, and you're gonna go, well, shit. So yeah, that sums up my thoughts on Azalea. Dio? Look, we've been seeing a lot of interesting builds come out about Dio with the stubby hammers and the 0 to 50s and just try to make the deck into a Cheerios deck. I don't think that build of the deck is very good, but I think there is builds of the deck that are very good. And I think if you're a wizard, not that wizard, but a different wizard, and you understand how to combo with this deck, Dio has sauce. The question is how consistent is your deck and how consistent are you going to be at comboing in every stage of the game? Because against the slow decks like Dromai and Stavo, this deck's pretty sourced as long as you can do the combo properly and they're like not super taxed for you. But can you do it fast enough to beat Viserai? I think that's the real question you have to ask with Dia. New as a deck, it does some things. It's pretty cool when it does the thing. It's pretty bad when it doesn't do the thing. The problem with this format is like the damage output can just be so high from some decks that it just doesn't matter. And I think the new Viserai matchup historically has not been favored for New either. So yeah. Raya, unfortunately the Warmonger's ban, I think this might have been the deck that got hit the hardest. Like the Warmonger's going to 3 thing. Like, don't get me wrong, CMH is still really powerful, but like sometimes you just like, they Warmongers you draw up and you're just like, man. Yeah, never mind, this game's over. And I think that's a real issue with the deck. Dash is and Don't Play. I don't really know how that slipped in there. Esilio is just still like this crazy combo deck that no one really knows what's going on with, but it's incredibly inconsistent, which means it gets stuck in this C. I would be very surprised to see it in the top 8 type of deck. I don't think it's the source, I don't think it's the way, but I think the deck is very cool and I hope we get to see one on camera. Gravy? It is a deck. 9 Tipples is pretty good. It has some source. It has like the Dromai thing of like if the deck can't deal with allies then it just gets, the deck gets stuck. I think the deck is just worse than Enigma, and is just worse than Prism, and is just worse than Dromai, and probably has quite a bad Viserai matchup, and a bad Dio matchup, and probably a bad everything matchup. Yep. Florian is like this weird deck, where it's like the stack deck that beats the stack deck. Like, this deck might have some source into Viserai, and then it has some source into Stavo, because it's just like better at doing what the Viserai wants to do in Stavo anyway. But it's so much worse into the decks like Dio and Kano. And I think that's the dynamic of the format a little bit. It's like, things can beat this, and things can beat this. But then the other part of this like little triangle of SA and Specialists just come in and just kind of kick you in the teeth. So I think this deck has more of an angle than a lot of these decks in C, but I think that angle is still very narrow. Whereas Fi? No, Fi, it's still not Fi time, guys. He's not going those last LL points, I'm sorry to say. Yeah, Fi is just like, it's a good aggressive deck, and it has a very consistent game plan that's very repeatable, which is something I like. But I don't think it beats Viserai consistently. I don't think it beats Stavo consistently. I think it probably has one of the worst Kano matchups. And I think it might just be worse than Zen. And yeah, I think that sums up the LL tier list, honestly. I think honestly, let's be a bit more harsh. I think Florian can probably move down there, and I think Enigma's probably just like at the top of here if it does exist. I think this format's actually much more narrow than CC, which is kind of scary to say. But like, I feel like the B tier and up decks are the ones that actually have potential. Like, maybe not Marlon, but like, I don't understand what the source is with like a lot of this format. Like it's weird. I think the BNR actually made the format worse because now it's just like so much more limiting and kind of degrading to the format. Like, there is like a clear best deck now. There is a clear like bunch of like very strong decks that exist. There's some specialist decks. But 9 times out of 10, I think people are just going to default and play Viserai. And I think we're going to see the data stack come up. And it's just going to be a big purple guy. And then like some Stavo. And then like maybe 10-15% of the metagame will be everything else. And I think that's a really grim format for Worlds. Anyway, guys, this has been my tier list for these formats. Get in the comments and tell me if you disagree with anything that's going on. This is kind of been a bit of a laid-back video, but you know, get in the comments, start discussing, think if there's anything like weird or rogue that you're expecting to see. This is obviously a very last-minute video, so I feel like I've left it to give us like the clearest picture of information about the formats we're actually going to see. But yeah, get excited, get ready. We're going to have Team Snapdragons of the World. It's going to be a massive event. Get ready for a really exciting time. And all eyes on Philadelphia, really. So I will see you guys after the World Championships are done. It's going to be just a crazy weekend. So get excited, get hyped, and get in the comments and start having a yap about your favorite hero and how wrong I am about them. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this take.